The 1st of September 1943. The war was still raging across Europe when the first transport trains rolled deep into the interior of the United States, carrying thousands of captured German soldiers who expected cruelty, starvation, and humiliation. They arrived thin, exhausted, many shaking with memories of combat, frostbitten winters in Russia, and the weight of a crumbling Reich on their backs. Yet what awaited them was something none of them could have predicted: the smell of bread. Coffee, meat sizzling on iron skillets, and a system so strangely humane that many of them would leave heavier, softer, and psychologically changed forever. Some would gain 50 pounds or more behind the fences of American soil, growing healthier than they had ever been within their own army. And behind that simple fact was a story woven with propaganda, intelligence manipulation, cultural shock, and a shadow war fought not with bullets but with comfort, ideology, and slow mental erosion. It began quietly, under the watch of men who understood that war was not only about killing bodies, it was about capturing minds. The US government, already deep into psychological warfare operations, recognized that treating German POWs well could fracture the belief systems that fueled Nazism. Not all camps were paradise, but the majority allowed the prisoners fresh food, open fields, music, sports, even classes in economics and democracy. They were fed better than American citizens under rationing. It's better than their own soldiers starving on the Eastern Front. The irony was heavy, almost absurd. Letters written home by PODs in careful script described meals with butter, eggs, bread, beef, real luxuries in Germany. But each letter was screened and secretly copied by US intelligence. Every word became data. Every complaint, every praise, every slip of information slowly created a psychological mirror to reflect the collapse of the Reich back to those still fighting in dusty train yards of Texas, in pine-scented camps of the Midwest, and in the humid heat of Louisiana. Guards watched with curiosity as once starved prisoners grew rounder, their cheekbones filling, their uniforms straining at the waist. Some of the young guards would joke about it, calling them fattened soldiers. But older officers understood the strategy. A fed enemy could become a friend, a witness, a defector. Food was not kindness alone. It was a weapon. Scientists of the OSS, the early American intelligence agency that would later evolve into the CIA, analyzed every aspect of POW behavior. They built reports of how morale rose with calories, how optimism softened loyalty to Hitler, how debates among prisoners revealed shifting ideological fractures. It was soft power hidden beneath warm plates in open sunlight. At night, around barrack stoves where coffee boiled and harmonicas played soft melodies of homesickness, there were conversations no battlefield could have produced. Men who once marched under the swastika argued about the future of Germany, about whether Hitler had deceived them, about rumors that Jewish families in America lived without fear, that black soldiers fought with courage beside white ones, concepts that clashed violently with everything they had been taught. Some resisted, others listened, and a few quietly wondered if losing this war might save what remained of their souls. The transformation did not happen loudly. It unfolded like a slow thaw after winter. Rumors spread through wire fences like ghosts in the night. Stories of German POWs who worked on American farms, helping harvest wheat beside families who offered them iced tea and sometimes, if no officer was watching, a slice of homemade pie. Others worked in sawmills, logging camps, and canning factories, earning wages they could spend in camp stores on cigarettes, chocolate, even pocket radios. They gained weight because the system fed them, but they gained something heavier. Doubt? The belief that their enemy might not be the monster they were told. And that was more dangerous to the Nazi regime than any rifle. Behind the scenes, secret denazification programs operated under the guise of cultural education. Lectures were held, not forced, but alluring, with skilled speakers who spoke fluent German and used Socratic questions rather than accusations. They showed films of American life, sometimes carefully edited, always deliberate. They discussed literature banned in the Reich, music considered degenerate, ideas that bloomed precisely because they were forbidden. and in the silence after each lecture, some POWs felt the ground of ideology cracked beneath them. Others clung harder to propaganda, forming internal hierarchies, policing thoughts, warning comrades that kindness was a trap. They were not entirely wrong. It was. The American guards watched the camp dynamics unfold like a psychological experiment. Hardline Nazi officers attempted to maintain chain of command, sometimes threatening weaker soldiers, sometimes holding secret night meetings to keep ideology alive. In response, intelligence officers planted informants, German POWs, who had grown disillusioned and now traded information for small privileges. Not one execution occurred for speaking out. Unlike in certain British or Soviet camps where betrayal could lead to silent graves, here betrayal was currency, and it bought warmer beds, easier work. Sometimes the promise of a future in America, this hidden war inside the camps was mostly invisible to the public eye. Americans saw barbed wire, guard towers, and columns of foreign soldiers marching to work details. They did not see the chessboard of minds being shaped one idea at a time. They did not know that some camps hid interrogation buildings where OS officers asked subtle questions for months, piecing together factory locations, troop morale, and production weaknesses. Many prisoners offered information freely, sometimes out of bitterness at the regime that abandoned them. Sometimes because gaining weight was not just physical, it lifted spirits, lowered defenses. As months passed, diaries filled with strange entries. German soldiers wrote about American humor, about the way guards tossed baseballs during shifts, about the absence of fear in civilian towns. They watched trains loaded with new refrigerators, cars, radios, symbols of industrial power that Germany could no longer dream of producing. They realized the terrifying scale of the enemy they had challenged. And at night, when spotlights swept across the perimeter, many lay awake and imagined a life beyond the war. The thought alone felt like treason. Not all stories were soft and gentle. Some prisoners tried to escape, driven by pride or loyalty or simple desperation. A few succeeded, living quietly under false names until discovery decades later. Others died by river currents, by bullets, by winter frost. But even those stories fed the myth that America, enormous and open, could swallow a man whole and yet offer him more freedom than his homeland ever had. Then came the reports documented, verified, that some POWs, after months of steady meals, had gained over 50 pounds. The military medical corps kept detailed health records, astonished at the reversal from malnourishment to robust health. A lieutenant once joked that Germany was sending skeletons and America was returning them as farmers. But beneath humor was a darker recognition. A well-fed prisoner returned. Home could become a living advertisement of American abundance. And the Allied command wanted exactly that. By late 1944, secret memoranda circulated through Washington discussing post-war influence potential. German POWs would eventually go back. They would tell stories. They would compare systems. And if they returned with memories of restraint instead of revenge, of food instead of starvation, then Germany might rebuild without falling into another fanaticism. A humane camp was not mercy alone. It was investment in a future enemy-turned-partner. Meanwhile, the war outside the fences darkened. Cities burned. Families vanished. The Reich shrank like a dying star. In some camps, when news of Allied advances came through hidden radios, a wave of conflicting emotions swept through the prisoners' anger at defeat. Relief that suffering might end, shame at atrocities whispered on the wind. A few dropped to their knees and prayed. Others clenched fists, swearing someday the humiliation would be avenged. But even they could not ignore their growing bodies, their regained strength. The absurdity that captivity had saved them from the frontline slaughter. Years later, when the gates opened and uniforms were exchanged for civilian coats, men walked out heavier in flesh and heavier in thoughts. They boarded ships back to a homeland of rubble, ration cards, and hunger. Children stared at them as if they were ghosts. Their wives barely recognized them. Some Germans whispered that America must have brainwashed them. But truth was quieter. America had fed them, housed them, and let them see the world without propaganda. The weight they carried home was not only fat on their bones, it was the collapse of certainty. Many of those former POS would later become bridge builders in post-war Germany teachers. Politicians, businessmen who remembered that enemy nations had treated them with dignity. They spoke of baseball games, of farm families, of Christmas dinners, with guards who shared cigarettes instead of threats. Stories spread like seeds in fertile soil. Some even emigrated back to the U.S., unable to forget the strange comfort of captivity. A few married American women, raising children who never knew the barbed wire that once separated their fathers from freedom, yet beneath these human stories were deeper shadows the public rarely hears: secret experiments in ideological conversion, quiet surveillance of camp behaviors, coded reports sent to Washington assessing which posts could influence post-war Germany. Intelligence agencies marked names, identified potential future allies, even offered some high-ranking officers new lives in exchange for technical knowledge. Many accepted. The roots of Operation Paperclip, though separate and more infamous, took nourishment from this earlier realization. Enemies could be harvested, not just defeated. And through all of this, the simple detail remains shocking. Men taken from a collapsing empire came to the land of their enemy and gained weight. 50 pounds, sometimes more. A symbol of war turned upside down, where captivity meant abundance and freedom meant ruins. A paradox that historians rarely voice with its full psychological weight. Because in the end, this is not only a story about food. It is about how a nation wielded comfort as warfare, how calories became persuasion, how kindness became strategy. And somewhere in the heart of every camp, in the rustle of cornfields where POWs worked, in the clang of dinner trays, in the sound of guards laughing at a joke told in accented English, the war was fought quietly, invisibly, in the human mind.